Hello, thank you for joining with me. We are reading with the Course Companions group, which began with Emily Bennington. She started it up with Robert Perry. We are reading out of A Course in Miracles, complete and annotated edition. This is Cameo 26, Helen and Bill's Holy Relationship. But if you would please join me in a prayer. This is from Chapter 2, Section 5, on page 91, paragraph 14. I would like to pray that my will be united with thine, recognizing that thy perfect love will suffice or correct for my imperfect love. I pray that I may accept the atonement with conviction, recognizing its inestimable worth and my own divine worth as part of this identification with thine. I pray that my fear be replaced by an active sense of thy love and thy continual willingness to help me overcome the split or divided will which is responsible for my difficulty with this. I accept the divinity of the messages I have received and affirm my will in both accepting and acting upon the atonement principle. Lord, here I am. And this is Helen and Bill's Holy Relationship. Cameo 26, Appendix 1. The text section, the beginning of the Holy Relationship, which is Chapter 7, Section 5, also marks the beginning of the holy relationship discussions in the text, which, starting here, weave through more than 5 chapters to the end of chapter 22. It is important to realize that these teachings on the holy relationship were initially directed at Helen and Bill, and thus reflect the particular history and issues of their relationship. Some of the specifics, therefore, will not apply to other holy relationships, even though the general principles will. Let's look then at the teachings that this section was giving them about their own very challenging relationship. Footnote 1. Quotations from this section will be identified only by paragraph and sentence numbers, while the quotations from other sections will be given a full reference. When this section refers to the experience in which the relationship became what it is referring to a very specific and important event, Helen and Bill's joining in another way. This was the holy instant in which the relationship was made holy. Here is Helen's description of that event from her autobiography. The context is conflict in their work situation. Every evening, I went over a long list of grievances regarding Bill at home, and I have no doubt that Bill did much the same thing. It became more and more evident that the best thing for me to do was to leave my position. However, Bill and I seemed to be trapped in a relationship which, though we hated it in many ways, could not be escaped. That change came most unexpectedly. It began one afternoon in June of 1965, before Bill and I were to leave for a weekly research meeting. He had something on his mind, that much was apparent. But he found it hard to discuss. In fact, he tried unsuccessfully several times to begin. Finally, he took a deep breath, grew slightly red-faced, and delivered a speech. It was hard for him, he told me later, because the words sounded trite and sentimental even as he said them. Nor was he anticipating a particularly favorable response from me. Nevertheless, he was merely saying what he felt had to be said. He had been thinking things over and had concluded we were using the wrong approach. Our attitudes had become so negative that we could not work anything out. He He had therefore decided to look at things differently. Bill proposed quite specifically to try out a new approach that day at the research meeting. He was not going to get angry, and he was determined not to attack. He was going to look for a constructive side in what the people there said and did, and was not going to focus on mistakes and point up errors. He was going to cooperate rather than compete. It was time to take a new direction. We had obviously been headed the wrong way. It was a long speech for Bill, and he spoke with unaccustomed emphasis as he delivered it. When it was over, he waited for my response in obvious discomfort. Whatever reaction he may have expected, it was not the one he got. I jumped up, told Bill with genuine conviction that he was right, and said I would try the new approach with him. That's from Helen's autobiography, page 27. Bill and Helen both realized that they had made a tremendously important commitment, a commitment that ended up having large-scale consequences for their department. At the factual level, the whole climate of the department gradually changed. Bill worked particularly hard on the departmental problems, determined to turn hostilities into friendships. This took considerable effort on his part at first, but he did succeed eventually. Tensions lessened and antagonisms dropped away. The wrong people left, though, on friendly terms, and the right ones came along almost immediately. A secure and interesting position opened up for me. Although our efforts were inconsistent and often half-hearted, there is little doubt that they showed results. The department became smooth functioning, relaxed, and efficient. That's from her autobiography, pages 27 and 28. They didn't need Jesus, therefore, to tell them that their joining in this new approach was significant. What he did reveal to them, however, was that there was so much more there than what they could see. In addition to its surface-level significance, this event was filled with untold spiritual significance. We can understand this significance in terms of their joining having both spiritual content and spiritual results, both of which were largely invisible to them. The conscious content of their joining was obvious. In response to years of chronic interpersonal conflict, Bill proposed an approach that was about replacing competition, criticism, and attack with cooperation and focusing on the positive. His approach, in other words, was about how people can get along. Jesus says in our text section, however, that on an unconscious level, there was something else happening. On that deeper level, the Holy Spirit had been calling to them, and Jesus himself had been knocking on their door. Although this was surely not a very conscious experience, it couldn't have been entirely unconscious either. Years earlier, Helen had confided to her psychoanalyst that she had a recurring experience of feeling the presence of a man behind her left shoulder trying to get her attention, which she steadfastly refused to give. That's from Absence of Felicity, page 43. The Holy Spirit's call was ultimately a call to see and treat others, and particularly each other, with love. Therefore, by joining in Bill's more loving approach, Helen and Bill were really answering his call. On a conscious level, of course, the two of them didn't even believe in the Holy Spirit, but on a deeper level, they were finally saying yes to him. This is why their apparently secular joining could be described in this way. You undertook together to invite the Holy Spirit into your relationship. It is also why Jesus could later say, I was a stranger and you took me in, not knowing who I was. In addition to inviting the Holy Spirit into their relationship, they were also accepting His goal for their relationship. For all they knew, they were simply setting the goal of getting along with each other and with their colleagues. But inside this goal was nested a far loftier one, the goal of reaching God together. For you have chosen but the goal of God, from which your true intent was never absent. Again, they didn't understand they had done this. You do not even realize you have accepted the Holy Spirit's purpose as your own. But there was a part of their minds that understood perfectly well. The Holy Spirit's purpose was accepted by the part of your mind the ego knows not of. No more did you. So the spiritual content of Helen and Bill's joining was that they were responding to the Holy Spirit's call and inviting Him and His goal into their relationship. This content then led to a series of far-reaching spiritual results. The key result, the source of all the rest, was that the Holy Spirit entered the relationship on a deep level, and on that level transformed it. At the heart of this transformation was Him replacing their old goal with His new one. The Holy Spirit wastes no time in introducing the practical results of asking Him to enter. At once His goal replaces yours. No longer was the relationship about each of them laying hold of a private treasure of specialness. Now it was about them, both of them reaching the altar of holiness together. Although this happened on an unconscious level, it was not without effects on the surface. One of those effects was the series of visions and psychic experiences that Helen had in the summer of 1965. Another was the appearance of Jesus' voice in her mind in October of that year, saying, "This is a course in miracles. Please take notes." This means the course itself was a visible effect of the Holy Spirit entering the relationship. Indeed, Jesus describes the course as an explicit answer to their invitation to the Holy Spirit. He heard, has He not been very explicit in His answer? Can you deny that He has given a most explicit statement? These life-changing effects showed that the Holy Spirit's entering was not just on paper, it was very real. Another important effect of Him entering was that Bill and Helen could feel that things were different between them. They could feel that the relationship now had an entirely different purpose. Even if they couldn't see the new foundation on which their relationship stood, they knew that it stood for something higher. And this they found deeply uncomfortable. Indeed, later on, Jesus will call this early phase the period of discomfort. The section we are now discussing in this cameo is His counsel on how to deal with that period. The discomfort itself is not that hard to understand. Over 7 years, they had formed a relationship that was all about their goal, in which each hoped to use the other to feel special. Yet now, this same relationship, which was largely unchanged on a form level, had accepted a lofty new goal. This disconnect between the relationship and its goal had 2 major results. The first result was that the relationship did not fit its new goal. The relationship, as it is, out of the line with its own goal and clearly unsuited to the purpose that has been accepted for it. It's as if their relationship was a car that ran well enough, yet its designated goal was to fly to the stars. Imagine the thoughts that Helen and Bill may have had at this point. How will we ever get there? Why have a goal that you can literally never reach? What a senseless relationship this is. In this situation, they started blaming each other for the relationship being so discordant with its divine goal, a tendency that Jesus said was likely to continue. You will find many opportunities to blame each other for the failure of your relationship. The second result was that at the same time that the new goal seemed impossibly out of reach, they still desired the old goal. They still wanted that feeling of specialness, the presence of the new goal, then essentially said to each of them, "You can't get what you want here." As a result, they were in danger of looking for fulfillment in another relationship that was unabashedly unholy. Now the ego counsels thus, substitute for this another relationship to which your former goal was quite appropriate. You can escape from your distress only by getting rid of each other. All in all, the change that Jesus was celebrating as a glorious rebirth felt to them like a major disruption. What had been an extremely frustrating relationship had now become a profoundly unsettling one. Rather than going forward, they just wanted to go back. It was crucial that Jesus address this state of affairs. Here the Holy Spirit wanted to take Helen and Bill on a journey to God, and 5 minutes later, after getting on the bus, they wanted to get off. In this section, you can feel Jesus doing everything he can to keep them on the bus. In the process, he urged them to do the following things. First, they needed to celebrate rather than bemoan the change that had occurred. They needed to bless their new relationship, not curse it. Condemn salvation not, for it has come to you. They needed to welcome the new and to look back on the old with clear eyes, not rose-colored glasses. Forget not now the misery you really found, and do not now breathe life into your failing egos, for your relationship has not been disrupted. It has been saved. Second, rather than changing the goal back to fit their old unholy relationship, which Jesus says is impossible anyway, they needed to do the exact opposite. There is no course except to change the relationship to fit the goal. Third, there was a discrepancy between their new goal and the means they actually employed in the relationship, which boiled down to judging and attacking. This discrepancy could make achieving the goal seem hopeless. They needed to trust, however, that they would be given the proper means, the means that actually fit the goal. Think you not the goal itself will gladly arrange the means for its accomplishment? Later on, chapter 20, section 7, the means would be identified as seeing each other through the eyes of Christ rather than the eyes of judgment. Fourth, they needed to actively resist the temptation to withdraw from the relationship and transfer their investment onto another relationship that dangled before them in the lure of specialness. Jesus' response to this was blunt. Hear not this now, abandon him not now, nor each other. This relationship has been reborn as holy. Fifth, they needed to have faith in where it was going and that it could actually get there. They needed to have faith in the driver, the Holy Spirit. Have faith in him who answered you. And they needed to have faith in each other, trusting that the other would really do his or her part. Have faith in each other in what but seems to be a trying time. 6, rather than blaming each other for failing to live up to the new goal, each need to forgive the shortcomings and appreciate the genuine contributions the other had made. And he, the Holy Spirit, had not been lacking in appreciation for all you have done for him. Nor does he see the mistakes at all. Have you been similarly grateful to each other? Have you consistently appreciated the good efforts and overlooked mistakes? Or has your appreciation flickered and grown dim in what seemed to be the light of the mistakes? Overall, Jesus was asking them to step forward into the new with trust and gladness in spite of their discomfort, in spite of the temptation to run back into the arms of the old. As with any major change, even when the infancy of the new is present, it can be hard to resist the siren song of the old. If they could just press forward, he promised them, the rewards would come. As this change develops and is finally accomplished, it grows increasingly beneficent and joyous. Indeed, their destination was not just a happy place for the two of them. It was a holy temple from which the blessings of their relationship would be generously bestowed on everyone who draws nigh, as Jesus later describes in this moving passage. The peace he laid deep within both of you will quietly extend to every aspect of your lives, surrounding both of you with glowing happiness and the calm awareness of complete protection. And you will carry its message of love and safety and freedom to everyone who draws nigh onto your temple where healing waits for him. Jesus' prescriptions for Bill's and Helen's relationship appear to make eminent sense. Indeed, they are not so different from the counsel a newly reformed alcoholic might receive. Yet it is well known that Helen and Bill's relationship never really escaped from the period of discomfort. This is truly unfortunate, yet perhaps not as surprising as it may seem. Undoubtedly, many, if not most holy relationships get mired in that period, or get broken off altogether because of it. There is such a bright promise contained in that initial moment of joining, yet laying hold of that promise means laying aside the ego to an unusual degree. And how many are willing to do that? But there is one cause for genuine celebration here. Even though Helen and Bill didn't reach that place of glowing happiness together, the temple they built still stands, and countless thousands still draw nigh unto it to receive the healing that waits for them. Robert Perry's Commentary, Day 219 of the Course Companions, Cameo 20 and 26, Helen and Bill's Holy Relationship. I am not going to write too much commentary today simply because the Cameo is mostly my commentary already. I was thinking that. But I can't resist a few remarks. What I think when I read this Cameo is that so many of the elements of Helen and Bill's holy relationship are familiar to me from my own experience. I know what it's like to be living a normal life when completely unexpectedly something that feels of God comes in and changes things, and then keeps changing things so that you end up living its story rather than your own. I know what it's like to feel like Bill in a compulsion to say or do something, wondering if it's appropriate, going back and forth about whether it's right. But when you finally yield to that compulsion, it turns out it was more right than you could have known. That urge you felt clearly came from a higher hand pressing on your insides. I know what it's like to have a conversation that, in the talons of some giant ego, picks up both of you and then deposits you in some new, unfamiliar land so that your journey now begins from there. I know what it's like to have a joining with someone that feels more than merely personal, that feels as if you have stepped out of time together and briefly visited a higher realm. I know what it's like to feel a larger goal has entered the relationships, so that whatever ordinary messy things the two of you act out on the stage of your relationship, you know that the backdrop for it all is that goal. You know that ultimately it's in charge. I know what it's like to experience that as a loss of cherished control, so that you spend years trying to reassert your own control, which doesn't work and only makes things harder. I know what it's like to be mired in what Jesus calls the period of discomfort for years, split painfully between the holy and the unholy, knowing you are together for a higher purpose, yet not managing to truly align with it. Finally, I know what it's like for that same relationship, as flawed and conflicted as it is, to be the manager for spiritual birth, from which will extend a spiritual ministry. As we know from history, heavenly things are born in imperfect places. I'm not remotely trying to imply that I'm the only one who knows what these things are like. Quite the opposite, actually. What I'm trying to say that, even though what happened to Helen and Bill may strike us as a unique visitation from a higher plane, the fact is that it was an example of universal patterns. This kind of thing is for real. It is not confined to Helen and Bill. It can happen to all of us. Thank you so much for joining with me. Day 219 in the Course Commentaries reading. Robert Perry, Cameo 26, Helen and Bill's Holy Relationship. I love you. Thank you.